All right, welcome to another fun-filled adventure of Comparative Vertebrate Anatomy Lab. Today we're going to be looking at part 2, the muscles of the throat and jaw. I'm going to show you some stuff up on the board in a little bit, but I wanted to show you some of the muscles right now. And then we'll go up to the board and we'll take a look at some of the patterns that we see with these muscles. So I have you zoomed in fairly well because a lot of these are not that big. And they're actually not bad. So understanding these muscles, seeing these muscles, I think is going to be fairly easy for you guys. So here my thumb is on the chin of the cat, and we're working our way down to the sternum posteriorly. You can see my external jugular vein running on both sides, and then running across you have your transverse vein, and then those jugular veins continue further up. We actually have some glands that you can see as well that I'm going to be pointing out. You don't have to know the glands. We're not going to cover those. One of the glands that you can see is the mandibular gland, and the mandibular gland is right here. It's this big brownish structure, glandular-like tissue. If you were here and you were pinching it, you could see it falls apart very easily. Glandular tissue, unlike your muscle, is really just like this loose granular-like stuff, like almost like an organ. Well, yeah. And as you pick at it, it just starts falling apart in your tweezers. In addition to the mandibular gland, I also have my parotoid gland, which is, you can see part of it up here. So we had from last time when we were learning the arm, we saw joining up here was my clavotrapezius. My clavotrapezius. It joins here and it wraps around towards the dorsal side of the cat. And that was that most anterior trapezius muscle that we learned. And so it's on both sides here, the clavotrapezius, and it joins basically right around the sternum here. Sitting next to that, this muscle, and this one, and I started pushing this one off to the side already a little, but these muscles that are basically bookends to the throat, this is going to be my sternomastoid muscle. Sternomastoid. It's going from the stern up to the mastoid process that's on the posterior side of the head. I'm going to show you the homologous structure for humans in just a little bit. In humans, it would be the sternocleidomastoid, but it's the same muscle, the sternomastoid here. So these are kind of my bookends to the throat region. And then if I look more medially, I have my sternohyoid. Here's my sternohyoid. If you can orient yourself with this transverse vein that I was showing you earlier, below that vein is typically the hyoid. Okay, that's where my hyoid bone would be. My sternohyoid muscle, and it's symmetric, there's one here and one here, they're running on top of the trachea, run down and they connect to the sternum, and then they go up anteriorly to the hyoid. Hence the name sternohyoid. Sternohyoid. So let's take this one and let's cut it. And then we'll take some of this connective tissue out of the way. Let me switch forceps. And what you're going to notice now is deep to my sternohyoid, I have some white cartilage down there. That's the trachea. All right, that's the trachea. And up here, this would be analogous to what you might call the voice box. All right, that's going to be my larynx. And if we look along the larynx, I have muscle running right on top of the larynx here. And it's running from the hyoid down to this region here. And then if I look on the other side here, I'm pulling away my sternohyoid. Here's my sternohyoid. Here's another muscle that runs from the sternum up to that same region where the other one terminated, up by the larynx. So you can see here's the one posterior muscle, and here's the more anterior muscle up on the larynx. You can't see it too well on this side here, but if I go to this other side, you see this structure here that I'm pinching with my forceps? That's my thyroid gland, or that's the cat's thyroid gland. So there was another thyroid gland right here as well. The reason why I'm pointing that out is because if we take this thyroid gland and we imagine it's right here, it's going to help us make sense of everything. So sitting on the posterior side, running from my sternum up to where that thyroid gland would be, deep to my sternohyoid, remember that's what I'm pulling, I'm reflecting off to the side now with my forceps, wiggling it around. So deep there, running from the sternum to where the thyroid gland would be, is my sternothyroid. Sternothyroid. Then I have, running from the thyroid area up to the hyoid, the other deep one that's more anterior, sitting on top of the larynx, running from where the thyroid would be to the hyoid, is the thyrohyoid. The thyrohyoid. Thyrohyoid. Sternothyroid, and then sitting superficial to all of those on top is my sternohyoid. The names are exactly where they are. If you can remember where the thyroid gland, where the hyoid bone is, and where the sternum is, all of these make sense. I have my sternohyoid running from the sternum to the hyoid. Below that, I have a muscle running from the sternum to the thyroid, sternothyroid. And then running from the thyroid up to the hyoid, I have the thyrohyoid. This all makes sense. That's great when things are that easy, right? And then if we go back to this muscle here, that was the sternomastoid. It's running from the sternum up to the mastoid process in the back of the skull. So whoever named these muscles, thank goodness for them, because they were a godsend. Fantastic. The next few that I'm going to be showing you aren't that, self-explanatory. If we look towards the chin of the cat here, you can see I have these muscles running on this diagonal along the mandible. So here's one, and here's the other. They're running on this diagonal. That's my digastric muscle. Digastric muscle. Sitting deep to that, that's like a plate going across. And it's not a plate, it's a muscle. But a muscle that spans across, that's my mylohyoid. Mylohyoid. It connects down here by the hyoid, for sure. And I'm not quite sure what mylo comes from. But this would be my mylohyoid. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some root words in just a little bit. But I'm not sure about mylo. I have to look that one up. Mylohyoid. Sits deep to my digastric. Here's my digastric on both sides. And my mylohyoid basically covers the superficial part of the chin. Okay? There's another muscle. let's see if we can do this. Zoom you in even further. That sits below this transverse vein. You see it right there? It's this one. Moving it out with my forceps from underneath the transverse vein. It's running from the side, the lateral side, to the middle. On this lateral side of the skull is a styloid process. This is my stylohyoid. It's running to the hyoid, and it's coming from that styloid process. This is my stylohyoid. We're going to use that root word stylo again in just a little bit. If I look over here, if I were to clean it up, and this one's so easy to break off, so I've kind of left it alone for the most part once I found it over here, but would be my other stylohyoid. Stylohyoid. Mylohyoid, digastric. And the mylohyoid I haven't done much with yet. I'm going to cut it in just a little bit so that we can look at some of the muscles underneath. But you can see just how thin it is, so I didn't want to touch it until after I showed you guys. There's two more muscles that I want to show you real quick. If I look to the side here, it would actually be running deep to these glands that I showed you earlier and running up. So basically following the line of my forceps. So you can see it here. That's my masseter muscle. That's what helps close your jaw and macerate your food, your masseter muscle. There's another muscle called lingualis proprius. Lingualis proprius. It's hard to say these things with a mask on. Lingualis proprius is another muscle that you're looking at right now, and I'm going to let you look it up. Try to figure out which one of these is lingualis proprius. All right, that'll do it for this, and then we'll dive into these deeper muscles in just a little bit.